Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is the almost last session in our conference today, and I don't know how you're all feeling, but I am excited and inspired by all of the members who have been speaking to you today. I am joined by our president, Nigel. Thank you for coming in.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Exciting times and exciting to be part of this conversation, Johanna.
Yes. And Nigel and I spend a lot of time talking about national standards. So it's a really good opportunity for us to go back kind of to basics and talk more broadly about it for this audience. We are taking questions in the Q&A and we expect there to be lots of them. So we'll try and answer what we can as we go through and then have some questions at the end as well. Okay. Now, we also have a bit of a slideshow, but we'll try and move through that reasonably quickly. So we'll just get started. So I think this is kind of the most important point. I know that when we talk about national standards, there's often a lot of anxiety, and that's understandable because it is a big change to the sector and a big change to how counselling and psychotherapy have been practiced and been regulated over the last couple of decades. However, the government has been very clear in their commitment to support the current workforce, and all of you are in that current workforce by the fact that you have undertaken study in this area, preferably accredited study, and that you are engaging with PACFA in this way. Now, PACFA has been very fortunate and in the fact that our standards align with the national standards very, very closely. That is not an accident. That is the result of hard work and lots of strategy. And what you can see there is a little snapshot of probably the first page, standard 1.1, of the national standards, and you can see that there are 3 descriptors for career stages, and the PACFA membership starts, or PACFA registration in particular, starts at level 2. So by completing an accredited qualification in counselling at AQF level 7 to 9, you are in alignment with the national standards. And so, congratulations on that. That's a really exciting choice. It's a really exciting time, and that's a really significant choice. And we welcome you when the time comes to join our membership and to advance the profession. Nigel, is there anything you'd particularly like to say about this?
I'll just add some historical context to the national standards discussion. For those that don't know, PACFA was formed about 25, 26 years ago, and it was formed because at that time psychology and psychologists were really sort of looking to dominate the mental health landscape in Australia, and counsellors were concerned. Counsellors were also fractured. PACFA is a federation, the Psychotherapy and Counselling Federation of Australia. So it's a federation of existing training programs and existing associations from right around the country. And there were more than 40 of them that came together, and they've come together essentially to achieve what we have now achieved, which is national standards for counselling and psychotherapy. So what's happening in the world of counselling and psychotherapy right now is precisely what PACFA was formed and designed to make happen. So it's a very exciting time to be watching this take place in my time as president. For those that don't know, I'm the president of PACFA. If you weren't here in the opening session, you would have missed that. So I'm the president of PACFA and have been since 2022. And we've got a board of elected and appointed directors, all of whom are clinical members and who have a range of terms. And it's through our strategic planning, through our strategic engagement with government, that these processes are taking place, and the fact that career descriptors for education and training at levels 2 and level 3, the fact that matches PACFA's existing registration standards is no accident. It's because we advocated effectively that we had in fact already had the right level of training and standards for counsellors and psychotherapists in Australia. Thanks, Johanna.
So I think, one of the things that one of the really powerful things about the conversation today is that I really hope lots of people watching have understood that they are not alone in any of the challenges that they are facing in getting started in their counselling career. For some people, it will be a smooth and easy transition, and for some people, it will not. And there are many challenges that are facing the profession that make that a little bit harder than they could be. And they range from professional recognition, award recognition, regulatory support, and none of them are new. And it's really, when I first joined PACFA, one of the things that I did was I spoke to a lot of members, well over 100 in my first few months. And I did get a lot of a lot of conversations where people were quite demoralised about how difficult some of the landscape could be. And the national standards really are the best answer we have got to many of those challenges. But they are not the only answer, but they are kind of the foundation answer, because they do solve a lot of the regulatory concerns that underpin a lot of the other challenges that we're facing. The other key elements are things like title protection, the fact that anyone can call themselves a counsellor or a psychotherapist, which just makes it very confusing for the community and for employers. The fact that counsellors and psychotherapists don't have GST exemption when other health professionals such as psychologists do, which makes the landscape for private practice inequitable. And then conversations around licensing, certification and accreditation, which are tools that counselling has not really historically used to showcase practice, whilst other professions have used them. So you can see a really effective advocacy tool in how social workers have used the mental health social work title, and OTs have used the mental health OT title. And so, we're coming from behind a lot of these areas, but national standards will help us gain some ground really quickly, I think. Now, I'm just going to start with the basics for people who may not be that aware. And this is very, very clear. The national standards are a government-funded project that's been funded and overseen by the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing. It was triggered, so to speak, by a presentation that PACFA did that was at Disto and myself in 2022 to the select inquiry into mental health and suicide prevention. And one of the key topics of that particular inquiry, and it was held during COVID, was the mental health workforce and why it was so hard for people to get access to predominantly psychology services. And of course, in that presentation, it would not surprise you to hear that Di and I were quite vocal about the fact that there was this actually really meaningful, valuable other workforce that wasn't being well utilised. A recommendation that came out of the select inquiry was that standards that were applied across the nation, across the entire counselling profession, would aid confidence, and that would increase the workforce utilisation and address any concerns around community safety. It's always worth remembering that as healthcare professionals, all counsellors and psychotherapists are under the remit of healthcare complaints commissioners nationally, and so that there is very clear processes for issues around clinical safety, and it's really important that we always keep that in mind. So national standards started a whole lot of conversations, and over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of work done behind the scenes. There was a summary report, there was a consultation, and you can see there a letter that we got from Mark Butler. We have been working really hard to make sure that the consultants and the bureaucrats involved with national standards understood the value of PACFA's safeguard for the community around the requirement for tertiary qualifications. So PACFA has always had the highest baseline for counselling and psychotherapy training in the country, and we're really excited to see that affirmed in the national standards, given the higher level responsibilities that are given to level 2 and 3. Okay, here you can just see the progress. The point here is just that it's a long burn. It's not working with government is never as quick and easy as you might hope. To be honest, I've worked with government on a range of different regulatory projects, and this is pretty much the speed of light from what I can see. They've gone from funding to talking about it to writing a draft to getting it accepted by the minister. And we have just completed a consultation around a regulatory model. And some of you may have seen encouragement from PACFA to participate, and indeed I hope you did. The consultation was open to everyone, and it was really important that we had lots of voices in there. A report is due from the Nous group, who were the ones doing that consultation, to the government in June. And there will be a recommendation in that report about what they think the optimal regulator model is. And I'll talk to you in a minute about what some of those options are. People frequently ask when the implementation will happen, and that has not yet been entirely decided, and that's partly because it will depend on the regulatory framework that is adopted, but the general sense has been 3 to 5 years. So that gives you a sense that for everyone who's in this room, this is something that's going to happen in your professional life.
Johanna,
Mm-hmm.
can I just jump in and just to clarify for people that the first phase, which finalised in October 2025, was what should the national standards for counsellors and psychotherapists be? That was the first question. That was one whole consultation on its own. That was the first consultation. So since October 2025, we've kicked off this second consultation, which the Nous group, as you've mentioned, has been appointed to undertake. And this consultation is about, okay, now we've got national standards, how should those national standards be implemented? And the question that the Nous group has been asking most recently and seeking to answer is, what should the regulatory model be? And I think that's what you're going to go on to talk about now. This question of, okay, if we're going to regulate counsellors and psychotherapists, counselling and psychotherapy, what should the regulatory model be that implements that in a way that's most effective for the profession, for the public, for the health service more generally?
And when we're talking about regulation, we're talking about things like, so at the moment, PACFA is one of the self-regulatory organisations in the counselling space. So the regulation is, part of that question is that the best way of doing it? There are a range of other alternatives, such as APRA. So you've probably heard of APRA, and these are different models that can be used. They're all essentially aiming for the same goal, which is an effective and highly valued workforce, but they're different ways of doing it. They carry different expenses and different complications. So in that last consultation, there were 4 models that were presented in a survey, and people were asked their opinion on it. Self-regulation is basically what we have now, where it is optional whether you join PACFA or another agency or not. Contract-based regulation is largely like self-regulation, but with far more incentives in place in terms of government contracts for employment based, requiring that at the moment a job ad might say you need registration with PACFA or eligibility for registration with PACFA, so it's optional. A contract-based regulation would be to perform this position, to be employed in this position, you must be registered with PACFA. So that's the contract is between the employer and you, but it mandates your involvement in registration. Statutory regulation is effectively the APRA model, which applies to 16 professions nationally, including all the medical and nursing professions and a few allied health professions, including psychologists and OTs. The rationale for which groups are in and which groups are out in APRA is a little bit idiosyncratic. It's largely about physical risk to clients or political pressure as applied when APRA was first established. So that just gives you a sense of what's kind of happening there. It's very meaningful, and as we all know, it's very strongly used for things like rebates. But it is also very expensive for government, and the government has traditionally been very reluctant to add more professions in. So it's never been as simple as saying we would like to join, please let us in. That's always been off the table. Although the fact that it was even included in this consultation indicates perhaps that's changing, which is really exciting. And then the fourth option is co-regulation within statutory regulation. And this is a new model proposed by a health policy report a year ago, which effectively says that organisations like PACFA can do a really good job of regulating the profession, but they require additional support and oversight from an organisation such as APRA to ensure that everything is ticked off at the highest level. And that is a general interpretation of what we think that looks like. The model itself is still in scope or in draft. So part of the risk around that model is that it is still in development and therefore could change. In that consultation model, PACFA encouraged the idea of statutory co-regulation, but we actually would be comfortable to work through any of the models with a real preference to not see voluntary regulation continuing, because the pure fact that people can opt in or out is just too confusing. And has not built community confidence in the way that we might have liked. So having gone through the national standards and having gone through the process of all these consultations and conversations, we do think it's really important that there is some change rather than just kind of letting things continue on in the way that they have. Okay. I can see a few questions starting to come through there.
Yeah, this is the preferred model, and if we have this model, we'll get all the benefits of APRA registration without having the overly tight regulation that our pure APRA regulation might bring.
Yes, and
we get to retain control over what defines a counsellor and what a counsellor can do, while opening up all the doors that APRA registration opens.
Yes, yes, and so just touching on a couple of the questions that are coming through. Do you anticipate that the title and role of counsellor will become a protected designation in Australia, and what implications might this have? I think eventually title protection is necessary and will be part of, it would be a part of the contract. It certainly would be part of statutory regulation or statutory co-regulation, and you could hope it would be part of contract-based regulation. The most important thing to think about when you're considering that is that none of this change is being done purely for the benefit of counsellors or the benefit of PACFA. It is being done as part of a larger package of healthcare reforms that specifically relate to allied health largely, about improving community access to important services. So if title protection is identified as an important thing to maintain safety across a whole lot of allied health professions, counsellors will benefit from that. And I would think that there is sufficient case to indicate that that is important. It's great to have national standards for counsellors, but as long as someone else is out there calling themselves a counsellor and not adhering to national standards, it's going to be impossible to police. And I'm sure anyone can see that. And so therefore, the argument for title protection is not actually about what would be best for us. That's what we think, because we can see the benefits for us, but actually it's about community safety and maintaining the validity of high quality training and monitoring. So I think with title protection, it's just a question of how they would do it and when they would do it.
Yeah, it'll be the detail, and we'll be very, very involved in the consultations around that. The other questions that are coming through around psychology assistance and the way national standards safeguard Medicare item numbers, advocating for the removal of diploma level counsellors or not, statutory co-regulation, including government rebates. And I think that the answer to all those questions is actually the same answer, which is this move towards regulation, particularly the statutory co-regulation or statutory regulation, will answer all those questions, and is precisely what this is designed to do, and that's very strongly what we're advocating for, so that counsellors and their jobs and their roles in society are protected and also expanded, because there's far more that counsellors can do and could do and should do, that because of the way that psychology in particular has been regulated, other professions as well, like nursing and occupational therapy, it's meant that those career pathways have been preferenced in roles where counsellors would actually be very suitable. So to have regulation, and that brings title protection, it brings access to funding, possibly like Medicare. It brings access to, it would put us on, it would likely lead to us being on the list of exempt professions from GST. All of these things would benefit counsellors both in terms of employment and in private practice.
Yes. And so I think the thing that is a bit difficult for people to understand is that these are all effectively leaves or branches of a regulation tree. And we don't know what the branches and leaves are going to look like quite yet. What we do know is that 20 years without national standards has not delivered any of them. So that makes it absolutely worthwhile from a strategic risk perspective to go ahead and to see what the tree is going to provide in terms of fruit.
The other questions there, so in terms of the diploma level counsellors, that's already finished, that's over. The diploma level counsellors are included in national standards, and so they're not going to be excluded. How they're regulated, that remains on the table, and we would advocate that with potentially, if PACFA gets the role of the regulator, the self-regulator, that we would actually include diploma level counsellors. So there's questions in the chat around, okay, is PACFA only going to start at bachelor's level? That's what PACFA has always been. 25, 26 years ago, when the founders of PACFA got together and they asked themselves, what is a counsellor? They determined that a counsellor was somebody who had a bachelor's degree. And that was necessary, we thought, to put us on the same standing as other professionals. Like psychologists and occupational therapists and social workers, any other nurses and doctors, any other health profession begins at a minimum bachelor's level. And if you're like, many of them, like psychology, only begin at a master's level. And so that decision was made long ago. The reason that there is an ACA and a PACFA is because that was something that didn't suit the ACA founders. The ACA founders very much wanted to support diploma level students because they owned institutions that trained diploma level counsellors. So now that we've come full circle and the national standards has determined that is a valuable workforce, because it is a valuable workforce, then we would then consider, okay, well, how do we effectively regulate? So then there's a question around affordability. And like psychology assistants, we do start to have these three levels of level 1, level 2, level 3, which starts to talk to affordability. The reality of regulation is that the value of counsellors will go up. So we will start to be paid more in terms of organisations that currently pay counsellors, and we will start to move towards rates of pay that approach those of social workers and psychologists. At the same time, there is this large cohort of diploma trained counsellors that are more at that level of psychology assistant and could be performing roles more like psychosocial services in NDIS.
So perhaps if I can just touch on something that is in the national standards, and that is that the level one group of practitioners, which is the AQF 5 and 6, so the diploma and certificate counsellors, are given, there is a number of limitations on their practice. They're not allowed to practice as supervisors. They are not, it is broadly implicit that they're not expected to go into private practice, although that will depend on the details of licensing. But they're also, they are confined to a limited scope of practice. Now, what that limited scope of practice is, we don't know yet, but the national standards do include that language. And I think that's really worth noting, because part of the reason why the broader community and employers have been so confused is because there has never been different scopes of practice for the different levels of training. As opposed to psychology, for example. So I think this is really, you've all got very good questions and you all want more information, and I'm really sorry that we don't have it for you yet at this point. This is how regulations developed. There is consultation happening with the sector. There is conversation happening with other sectors, with other partners in the sector. And I think we are on a journey and it is coming through. So what I can assure you is that PACFA has been vocal on your behalf. You can see some correspondence there. We're talking to all the state governments, particularly around the fact that the national standards should build confidence for employment. And that goes back to the central point for today's program. It is really crucial that counsellors are better utilised as an employment workforce across state government services, and that happens in the first 2 years of post-graduation rather than being held for a later magical mystery day when all of a sudden everything works out fine. So this is where PACFA is putting a lot of our advocacy energy at the moment. And we have just employed a consultant to work with us on employer liaison and advocacy, and we are going to be going out to all the major employers on your behalf. And developing a special project to really make it clear around what the competencies, skills and expertise of new graduates are and how they can be better utilised in this mental health landscape, because we think that's really crucial.
Do we keep answering some more questions? Because I think I can cover some quickly.
How about we just finish the slideshow so I can turn it off, and then
All right,
we can speak
we'll
to
come back
people.
to the questions. Thanks,
Yeah.
Johanna.
Okay. So I'm just going to cover on this really, really quickly. Next steps is, that PACFA will be advocating for all our members, all our registrants, as national standards ready. We believe our standards have always meant that was the case, and we don't have the difficulty that some other organisations might have of trying to weave up and down between who's ready for what. Our members are all ready, so we really encourage you to come and join us, and I really hope that some of you have been speaking to Sitong in the booth about what you can do to make sure that you can join PACFA as soon as possible. We have also been talking today about the opportunity to use PACFA's networks and services to build your counselling career, the benefit of our badges. We've got some great CPD coming up about Google and gaining contacts and referrals. We do provide an enormous amount of cost-effective CPD. And if you're not using that already, I really encourage you to. And we do also encourage you to think about, and I thought this was really nice in Daniel Ball's presentation, about thinking about what was coming in the future, what the next challenge is. And counselling, even as a second or third career, is still a long-term career. People do it for a very long time. People quite, practice until their 70s, mostly because they seem to love it. So we really encourage you to look at our colleges and our certifications and think about what kinds of advanced training, what kind of member associations, what kind of communities you want to participate in. And how you can continue building your career and skills. Because whilst those areas of advanced practice are not in the national standards, they are very much of interest to employers. And PACFA is very keen to be able to promote to employers that we have a widely varied and deeply skilled workforce. And, so those credentials are really useful for you in that. And look, I put stay calm and carry on. And that's really because the message we are getting from the government is very reassuring and very positive. And by working with us, you are positioning yourself in the best possible way for this to be a great opportunity for you rather than a challenge or a threat. Okay. So we just have some frequently asked questions, which perhaps we could leave up while we start to talk to some other questions, Nigel, if that's how you want to do it.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good way to do it. I think there's some good answers there to some questions that people might have, and we'll try not to replicate. Has there been pushback from psychologists? I think the answer is absolutely not. We've been in talks with the Australian Psychological Society, and they're very excited about what's happening. But they want to know who counsellors actually are, and they want to know who they should be working collaboratively with. And so for them to get clear levels gives them an understanding of who's a diploma level counsellor and who's a tertiary qualified counsellor, because they experience and relate to them differently. In terms of accessing post-tertiary professional development, everything's going to tighten up. There's going to be like a domino effect or a ripple effect from this, where over time, and it's not going to happen straight away and may not happen as quickly as people like, but there will be a domino or a ripple effect where everything around counselling and psychotherapy will get clearer and tighter. The big issue that we've faced over the last 26 years is the murkiness. I'm a counsellor. Well, do you have a cert? Do you have a diploma, or do you have a master's or a PhD? Well, we're all counsellors, so there's no, from the public's perspective, there's no difference. We had a real visibility, a real credibility, and a real integrity issue. So the national standards, implementation, regulation, particularly co-regulation, is really going to tidy all of that up, and there'll be ripple effects out into training, professional development, protection, title protection, and the kinds of jobs that will become available. And as Johanna's said, it's happening very quickly, more quickly than has been seen in almost any other area that anyone's been aware of. So, and it's probably because we're so ready to go. We've been preparing for 25 years for this moment. So, our profession is ready to take advantage of the opportunities that come. Yes, and you'll see more jobs opening up. So we can tick that. Yeah, more jobs are going to open up. Counsellors will be listed more frequently on all sorts of jobs, as has been as has been grasped onto into the chat in the chat. Go for those jobs. A lot of jobs say social worker or psychologist or OT or mental health nurse, and you read the job description and you think actually that's for a counsellor. Often the person who's writing the job ad doesn't know that counselling is a profession. They don't know that you as a counsellor exist and that you have a counselling specific qualification. So sometimes we need to inform them one employer at a time.
And part of what we're hoping to do with this employer liaison role is actually have a more systematized approach to that. We have been sending out letters and emails and liaising with people one-on-one, but now we will have someone who that's a core part of their job rather than just being something that's been extra for other people. So if you see jobs that you think are a counselling job and counsellors are not included, or PACFA is not included, send them through to us and we will get some responses out quick smart.
Question about the difference in levels if the same title. Although that's right, the titles will need to change. We at PACFA we have certified practicing counsellor, registered clinical counsellor, registered clinical psychotherapist, and you'll be able to get certifications in creative and experiential therapy. Somebody's asked about art therapy from PACFA's perspective. That's creative and experiential therapies within the PACFA model, so that should be covered as well. I think that top question, Johanna, do you want to respond to that one? Like where counsellors are best placed during the transition? Is there a shortage?
Counsellors are best placed in counselling jobs. And what we are going to have to do when as the national standards is implemented is not just wait to see more jobs emerge, but also push some other professions out. Because the reality is there is actually quite a significant, like the numbers of people who claim to be counsellors is something like 40,000. And a lot of them are not registered with a counselling organisation. So I think the national standards are already playing a key role in helping people understand what a counsellor actually is, and that will help them understand what a counsellor is not. State government, I think, our state governments and state government funded services, family services, justice, school counselling, early childhood, disability services, these are all areas that have a constant demand for people who are currently doing counselling jobs, but are not counsellors. So I think that's going to be a really exciting opportunity in the next 12 to 24 months as things start to shift. We have already seen shifts in private health insurance and in education, particularly around places where psychologists were the only people who were allowed to be school counsellors, and now it's opening up to counsellors as well. So sometimes the achievements are so obvious that they don't feel as significant as they probably are, because everyone's just like, oh, of course. But you sometimes change is incremental, and then all of a sudden it's really fast. So we are working our way through those bottlenecks, and we are keen to hear from members about opportunities and things that we should be targeting as well.
Okay, so I'll just answer some of the other questions. People asking about what will happen to research. That's another one of the ripple effects as we move closer to regulation and recognition and credibility. Then we'll see more research and more funding for research as well. PACFA has a research committee. The chair of the research committee sits on the PACFA board. His name's Adrian Holmes, Dr. Adrian Holmes now. I think he's got his PhD. And we will work. The research committee works with the national heads of counselling and psychotherapy educators, and also works with national groups looking at research. And in particular, there's a strong push at the moment to increase the amount of PhDs within counselling, which PACFA is very much supporting.
And I would also point out that PACFA is supporting this with our wallet. PACFA is giving away grants of up to in total $20,000 annually to support research in counselling. So and that's something we're doing because our members have told us it's important.
If you're interested in research, put your hand up for a grant. Apply to the research committee.
The information's on the
Student people at the moment, like if you're a student counselor and you want to start working, the honest answer is there's nothing that can stop you. There's no, from a PACFA perspective, we would suggest that private practice should be preserved for people who have clinical registration. So you've already got at least 750 hours of clinical supervised practice behind you at that point, and over at least 2 years. At that point, we would suggest you could begin to consider private practice. One of the concerns that we have and the community has and government has is people rushing out straight after getting their diploma, for example, and opening a private practice. And there's real community safety issues at play there. In terms of employment, absolutely the same thing. Absolutely nothing stopping from getting a job. A lot of the speakers earlier today who talked about employment pathways, they talked about being students and utilizing their existing training, their existing skills, their past careers, their past work experience, their life experience to apply to organizations and get jobs. Everybody talked about getting a foot in the door. Certainly, when I began, I was very clear that if I was going to get a foot in the door, it was going to be through volunteering. So while I was a student, before I even became a counselling student, I had my hand up saying I'm going to volunteer here and volunteer there, and it's through that I actually got a lot of my experience. So it's a standard pathway. Some people go, oh gosh, why do we have to do more volunteering after we've already done a placement? It's the reality of the workforce, and it's not just counsellors, it's everybody. Might standards change how counsellors and psychotherapists work? What we would be hoping for is that there is a lot more um, collaborative integration in mental health teams, that counsellors become a mainstay of a mental health team, and the role of psychologist, OT, mental health nurse, and counsellor is differentiated. Social worker, counsellor is differentiated, so that people more clearly have their scopes of practice and role descriptions, and effectively stay in their lanes and work collaboratively together where they are most skilled and have the right kinds of training and experience. I'm not sure what this question means. A master's level in PACFA Clinical 2, going to be on par in national
No.
standards.
I think if you were, and I won't go back to it now, but if you were to reflect on the slide that I showed at the very beginning of the presentation, which showed the career 3 levels of stages, those are the 3 stages. They have been signed off by Minister Butler. That is no small task. No one will be changing those.
So
There may be
PACFA Clinical Registration is level 3, and PACFA Certified Practicing Counsellor is level
level
2.
1. Oh,
Level 2. And level
yes.
1 is only diploma counsellors, which at the moment is not part of PACFA registration, though we might open up to it in the future if we become the regulator for the industry.
Okay. And
Hypnotherapy would not specifically part of things.
no, specialist modalities are not listed in the national standards, and that the national standards is about core counselling and psychotherapy training. And so one of the important things, one of the pieces of fine print that is worth noticing in the national standards is that it specifies the completion of an accredited course, not just any course, an accredited course. And then in the accreditation section, there are requirements around placement and length. PACFA accredited courses are the only accredited courses that meet the national standard levels specified in the national standards. So that's a really important distinguishing feature. And that makes the role of the organisation who is accrediting the courses a really important one. The area of specialisation and modality training is above and beyond the national standards, and that will continue to be the case.
So some of the questions I think we've part answered. There's a good question. I'll ask the most recent one first because we've answered that one. Employment opportunities are often limited to people who have already got clinical status. Is that likely to change? We would say absolutely. That as there's clarity in the sector around the definitions of what counsellors are, what they can do, and our PACFA's role in this is in developing clear scopes of practice and sets of competencies for counsellors and psychotherapists, which is what we're working on now. That will become clearer. So that will be addressed in the time to come. And We've already got we've got a project underway at the moment, or a number of projects that are looking at how to address the experience gap. So how do you know how
Well,
what
I
are we
think
doing to help develop? Um,
I think we've heard a lot today about addressing the experience gap.
mm,
And lots of people can address the experience gap and do it very successfully at an individual level.
mm,
So the idea that early career counsellors never get work or can't get work is actually not correct. However, it is more difficult than it should be, and we are recognising that. What we are trying to do at a systemic advocacy level is use the interest around the national standards as a tool to engage employers with conversations about how they could better use a certified practicing counsellor workforce in their employment model. And that will happen through relationship, just like everything does, just like your work with your clients happens. We've got to a point now where we're able to dedicate some resources to building those relationships. And it will take some time, but with the backing of the national standards and with the clear enthusiasm from the government for employers to make better use of this workforce, I'm confident that we're going to see some significant improvements. Okay.
And one of the questions is about the advantages of co-regulation and statutory regulation, but we've covered this already in a webinar that was specifically in relation to the implementation project. So I think if somebody from the team could put the link to that video in the chat, would that be the best
They
way
can
to
try
do
and do that, yes. And if they can't get that through, it is on the website. So I do encourage people to go and have a look. It's available to all members, and basically it's rigidity. You know, the APRA model is quite rigid. It has a lot of people and it's very expensive. And the more you force counselling into the same model as other health and medical professions, the more you risk having less nuance for the expression of counselling priorities, which, you know, it might be fine, but it is a risk. And that's one of the reasons why we're a little bit nervous about that model. But we will wait and see what the government has to say to us. Now, Edwin has joined us again, or has he? He's about to, while we talk about, while we present the prizes for the end of the.
We were going to do a wrap up, I think, Johanna first, and then talk about that. I think that before we do that, there's still that confusion. Oh yeah, people have clarified it in the chat. People were confused about what do I need to be level two. So there's a confusion there. Level one, so there's three levels in national standards. Level one, diplomas. Yeah, so that's pre-bachelor's. Level two is if you have a bachelor's degree and you register with PACFA or ACA at level three and level four, then you will be level two. And level three and ACA. And then once you have 750 hours of clinical practice and 75 hours of supervision, then you will be, and you register with the registering body at that appropriate level, then you will be level three. So if you've done your bachelor's degree that's accredited with PACFA and you apply to become a certified practicing counsellor, as soon as you're a certified practicing counsellor, you are level two in the national standards.
Yes, sorry everyone, I jumped a little bit ahead because my screen changed and it's been a long day with lots of moving boxes. We are going to a closing reflection. Nigel, if you're ready, is that okay?
Sure. I wonder what sort of questions people have coming out of the day. I think it's been a really interesting day. I've really enjoyed listening to all of our speakers. Loved listening to Daniel Bull talk about his adventures and that metaphor of the journey and climbing the mountain. I think is a great metaphor for all these questions coming through about how do I start? How do I get experience if I can't get a job? It's the classic dilemma, and we have all been there. And it's this I can only get a job if I've got experience. How do I get experience if I can't get a job? And there's lots of answers to that question. Volunteering, starting in different roles, get the job you can, use the skills you've already got, network, find a way to get your foot in the door. It's the same for every new job seeker out there in the world. How do you make that start? So be creative and make that start, and like take a leaf out of Daniel's book and persevere when your fingers feel like they're about to fall off. keep on going. Stay warm, stay safe, find your safe place to come back to, but go out there and take some risks. We had some great discussions about finding your first counselling role. So we keep looping back to that. I wonder if people have joined after that session. So there was a full session on that, which you can find in the recording. And we also had the follow-on discussion around building a sustainable counselling career. So thank you to Jacob and Rebecca and Rachel who joined Johanna for that discussion, which was also very, very rich in terms of thinking about what a career in counselling might look like. And it's so varied. It really is so individualized to the kind of counselor you want to be, and what your dreams and aspirations are for yourself as a counselor. We talked about private practice, compliance, protecting yourself as a professional, a good conversation with Sophie and Katinka and Melissa about supervision and what self-care looks like and what good supervision looks like. There were a lot of questions I noticed in the chat around, gosh, if I'm not seeing any clients and I need my 10 hours of supervision to stay registered, how do I trade that off? And I think that they're great questions that our team is going to be looking at and thinking about. Okay, how do we manage for people who, because essentially if you're not getting any hours up, you also can't maintain your registration. We don't have a minimum hour requirement at the moment, so it's the supervision requirement that is the minimum. And people are like, well, it's really expensive, but then again, we've got a list of providers who provide low cost group supervision. So there are ways to access supervision that isn't going to break the bank. And Johanna and I have been talking now about the national standards and the future and what comes next, and how national standards and regulations are actually precisely what PACFA was formed for 25 years ago, and what it exists for today, and how exciting it is to be standing quite literally. We were on the precipice, I think 12 months ago, and now we are beyond the precipice. Now we are almost kind of on this downhill run of like, right, the things are going to snowball, we're going to gain a lot of traction. Everything is happening precisely the way that we have been advocating and quite literally plotting and planning behind the scenes to make happen. So it's so exciting to be a part of seeing it happen. I think the part that we didn't talk about in this conference today that we often talk about is how important it has been for PACFA on behalf of counselling and psychotherapy to really present itself as a tight, professional, extremely well-governed organization. One of our key words for the last couple of years has been integrity, and really demonstrating integrity through our structures, through our people, through the way that we show up, and making sure that we appear and indeed are under scrutiny of the highest integrity. And I think that's making a difference, because now the government comes to talk to us, they listen to us. I think it's a huge talking point that the Australian Psychological Society approached us and engaged PACFA in talks about what we anticipated for the future of mental health. It's huge that we are a full member. We're the only counselling association that's a full member of Allied Health Professions Australia, which means that our members and only our members are fully qualified allied and recognised allied health professionals. We're also the only counselling body in the country that's going for full membership, currently under consideration for full membership of the National Alliance of Self-Regulating Health Professions. So we are well on the journey. It's been part of our strategic plan to set ourselves up for many years now to be a self-regulating profession, and to really understand what that means in the context of the Australian health system, what government needs, what industry needs, and what consumers need in order to feel safe and confident accessing different kinds of professionals, particularly counsellors and psychotherapists. So if you have any more live questions, you can add them into the Q&A, but at this stage, it's it's all just chat, and the chat's very busy, but if you're not putting questions in the Q&A, just remember we won't be getting to those. All right. And so any closing reflections from you, Johanna?
Just a couple. Yeah, my first is to apologise for not being able to respond to the chat. Unfortunately, I can't see it. So if you're wondering why I haven't picked up on your moments of brilliance, which I'm sure are there, that's just part of how the structure of the site has worked. I'm not deliberately ignoring you, I promise. Look, there were a few things about Daniel's presentation that I just thought related really, really well to what we've been discussing. And Nigel has covered up on a couple of them, but I would just say that when he talked about the moment of standing on Everest and looking at the curvature of the world and being able to think about his life and his family in the context of that, I just thought that was a really nice alignment with what's happening at counselling at the moment in terms of what we're looking at around the regulation. The regulation of healthcare applies to all healthcare professions. We are not seeking to make counselling any different from anything else. We are just seeking to join the broader healthcare family and to make sure that we make those same commitments to quality and excellence that other professions have made. And sometimes it can feel a bit intense. It can feel like, people are picking on us or people don't understand what we're doing. But actually, when we step back and look at the curvature, it all makes sense. These are pretty reasonable expectations that people have. And in fact, our members are proud to meet them. PACFA was unique in that when the select inquiry first said, we think the profession, would benefit from consistent standards nationally, we came out straight away and said, we absolutely agree. And that was not the case across the broader field. So, we're really proud at PACFA to be leading advocacy to advance the profession. And the other thing, and this might be just a little bit of wishful thinking on my part, but I really hope that when you all go home and think about how you're going to plan your careers forward and look at your job, look at your future jobs, and that when you think of that base camp bliss, that maybe you just think of including PACFA in it one way or another, and maybe not the bliss. I don't think we can provide bliss, but if PACFA could be part of your base camp to help keep you warm and supported and connected to your community and encouraged and optimistic about the future for your profession, then I think that we would be doing our job really well.